Hey guys, Saints here, and welcome to my channel. If you enjoyed the content, please leave a like, share, and subscribe for more. Now, a little disclaimer before I get into today's gameplay footage. The footage was recorded from my Xbox One, and because of some issues that the game had with frames already, through the process of recording it, when the game drops frames, the recording drops frames even more. So some of this footage is a little bit framey. But without any further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so I would like to talk today about the demo of Anthem. And I'm sure you've seen plenty of videos discussing this already, but I want to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly that I saw in here, along with a couple other things throughout here as well. To start with, let's talk about some of the ugly things. Most specifically here, what I want to talk about was the server launch. We are living in 2019, and yet we still have server launches where the player base cannot get into the game. Now, I realize that this was a demo, but they launched this VIP demo that was supposed to be only for those that had pre-ordered. And then they gave those that pre-ordered 3 codes to give out to friends to play with them, and yet they still had a huge tanking on the servers when people started to play. And this was during the middle of the day, while most of the kids that would have pre-ordered this as well were at school. So I was a little bit disappointed by that. Being that it's 2019, you would expect that they would have been able to have accurately predicted how many people were going to be getting on the servers and been able to have dealt with that. But having said that, you can't judge the game based off of the server performance at launch and stuff. That was just a little bit probably more from EA than I would say from BioWare, as EA has historically bad servers. So I would put that fault more on to EA than I would on to BioWare. But let's move into some of the bad. As I mentioned in the start of this, some of the frames drop throughout this while I'm playing on the console. Not as bad as they do in the video, but the video emphasizes how badly the frames do at times drop, and it can be quite bad. There were instances of lag that I felt while playing that were pretty significant. There was a point in time when me and another person that I was playing with literally could not move because we were being rubber bandaged so hard, and we just had to completely back out and come back in. And then there were times where the AI did not feel very responsive. There would be times when I would be able to stand right next to an AI and they wouldn't react, or I would run right past them and they wouldn't even take shots at me. I would say that the AI needs some work on their targeting. You'll find that some people will complain about how bullet spongy the AI was. In this instance, I wouldn't complain about it. In the Division, I could unload a 30-round magazine with a high-powered assault rifle into somebody's head, and they'd just walk it off, and that would make absolutely no sense. But in this case, them being bullet spongy makes sense to me through the lore, so I'm not complaining about that, because lore-wise, it would make sense that they would be more bullet spongy. Everything on here is on equal or greater terms with the faction that we play as, in my opinion, because the Scar live out in the world where it's incredibly dangerous, and arguably one of the best javelins in the game. is the storm, and the only reason why we have access to it is because we reversed engineered it from the Dominion, which is the main antagonist of the story. Um, Now, what I do find a little bit, I don't know where to put the blame on this one. Uh, there were several instances where I went to attack an enemy out in free play, and it would just simply disappear. This was annoying. It's a little bit of XP that I missed out on, but it was also a little confusing as there was no real reason for that to be happening as far as I could tell. But these are probably the main things that I would see as being the bad things about this, at least right now. They all can be worked on and improved and need to be improved by the launch of the game in just a few weeks. Now, granted, this build that we're playing in the VIP demo is about 6 to 8 weeks old, somewhere in there. But that's no excuse for it to be as laggy as it was, and for the AI to be as interesting in their behavior patterns. But all of that can be worked on. The other thing that I found to be quite, they said that the economy was changed for the demo, and it doesn't take long for a person to see how EA is going to do microtransactions in Anthem. It's there. It's microtransactions are the big thing that everybody's talking about nowadays, and the way that they're doing is going to be, as far as I can tell, strictly cosmetic, and will not be affecting gameplay at all. Now, having said that, depending on how they balance what they're doing for cosmetics will determine how I feel about it. Because if they do it right, they could make a lot of money off of it, or they could cause a lot of problems. The currency that you use to buy the cosmetics and emotes are a coin, and during the demo, all social aspects of it, including the vinyls and special looking gear pieces for your head and arm and legs and torso, all cost 25 of these coins. Now, you can earn these coins in the game, but during the time I played, I earned 1 coin for every hour, basically. Now, this could be altered and based on what I was doing and the difficulty that I was doing it at and things like that. But essentially, it would take a person by that same generalized amount 100 hours to get 100 coins, which in the case of the beta would be 4 pieces of equipment. In the base game, that could only be 1 piece of equipment for all I know. Now, if I were to talk about how I see the balancing for the microtransactions going, what I would see is the common pieces of gear costing us probably 100 coins. And 100 coins would probably be valued at about $1. So it would be 1 cent per coin, which seems reasonable. However, look at it, and I would say that it is reasonable. But if you were to look at it also further out and see it as 1,000 points for some of the 1,000 coins for some of the more badass looking pieces of equipment, that would be $10. So to fully deck out your javelin, that would be an extra $40 that you spent just to make your javelin look cool. Not including a vinyl, which would make it another $50 if it were to translate that way. I'm not saying it's going to. I'm just saying that would be the reasonable process that it would go through, and that I can see it going through. Only time will tell with that, though. Let's see here. So let's move on from the bad things onto some more good things. So this game is based around its movement. That is what Anthem is. You're flying, you're dashing. All of this is based upon movement. Anthem is about how you traverse and how you understand the traversing. Being able to traverse well can relate to you being able to make important plays. In every third-person shooter, movement is not important, but in Anthem, it is. And I would say that Anthem's core movement system is what sets it apart from every other game and influences how you play the most. And I would say that the javelins that benefit most from this are the Interceptor and the Storm. And I feel that because movement is such a core part of Anthem, that you'll see that the Interceptor and the Storm are probably going to be some of the two best javelins in the game, because they both take a unique approach to how movement is used. With the Storm, they hover everywhere, basically, to keep their shields up. With the Interceptor, you're dashing in and out of combat and using your superior movement in combat to the other javelins to your advantage. And I feel that it gives a much larger boon to the Interceptor. And that's why I feel like the Interceptor is going to be the best javelin, is because it takes the movement better than all the others. Now, this is a BioWare game. BioWare is not known for having great combat mechanics necessarily. But the combat feels really nice in Anthem. The shooting feels nice. Using your abilities feels good. I just genuinely enjoyed the gameplay as far as the combat goes. Each weapon feels good. I heard of instances where it sounded like the audio files had bugged out and they couldn't hear sometimes when their gun was going off. I personally never experienced that, but perhaps it did. I also have here the loot balance. I felt like I was getting a fair amount of loot for what I did, and at a fair rarity level for what I was doing and the level that my character was at. Now, I would say that there were times when it felt like the loot that I was getting was very focused. Like, the loot that I would pick up would all be for javelin upgrades to my assault systems and stuff like that. And then other times I would get it and it would all be weapon stuff, new assault rifles and grenades and things of that nature. And I felt that there were times when it felt like it was more balanced to me getting equipment, and more times when it was a balance towards me getting weapons. So I would like to see a little bit more variety when it comes to what I was actually collecting from the rewards. But overall, with crafting material and things like that, I felt like I was getting it at a reasonable and decent amount. Now, I would like to talk about the uniqueness of the javelins. Uh, from the time that I played, each javelin felt extremely unique and felt like they played entirely different. The Ranger and the Colossus both felt more like they were weapon centric, to where you would be using your uh, weapons, your main primary weapons, more often. And the Interceptor and Storm felt much more like they were intended to use their abilities. The Storm more so than the Interceptor. The Interceptor was extremely melee focused, I felt. And through the time that I had playing on the Interceptor, which is what I spent most of my time playing on once I unlocked them, I found myself not using my primary weapons very much during engagement, simply because I didn't really feel the need to. It felt like the melee function worked as well, if not better, than any weapon I had, and I could accomplish more by being in melee prolonged versus hanging back and shooting. Uh, the Interceptor's the build that I got off to personally, and in this gameplay footage I'm not using it right now, would be the Whirlwind sniper rifle using its high damage and high rate of fire as a sniper rifle assault rifle hybrid. For long range and on bosses, with the high-powered pistol being the secondary for the mid-close range engagements. Of course, I preferred to stay in melee as much as possible, but when you're out of it or you're at a slight distance, it's always good to have those things to switch off to. And I felt that that was the best way to go with the Interceptor. But moving on, the Colossus felt very heavy weapons is where you want to go with the Colossus, obviously. You're the only person who can use them, and they deal some very high burst damage. Storm felt very it was very core to have one. They were excellent at setting up your combos, and I didn't see so much Ranger gameplay later on, but the Ranger was definitely integral in this gameplay through, and has a very nice kit. And I could easily I see the Ranger as the baseline by comparing to other javelins, and I would say that the Interceptor taking the top place because of how it utilizes the movement system, followed by the Storm, the Ranger, and then finally the Colossus. Now, these are just my opinions, but I felt that it was an apt assessment. But the diversity in the javelins feels nice. The diversity in the weapons feels nice. Multiple different types of sniper marksman type rifles, different types of assault rifles, pistols, and LMG. From what I've seen, the Whirlwind is my favorite sniper rifle for the Interceptor because of how it mixes with the sniper rifle and the assault rifle, allowing for high rates of high amounts of damage. I was not expecting what I got out of it. It's zoomed in like a sniper rifle, and I assumed it was semi-auto until I held down the trigger once, and it popped off full auto like an assault rifle, and I was just absolutely surprised. Now, it only has 12 rounds, but that's 12 high-powered rounds being fired off really fast. There were bolt-action sniper rifles, and there were semi-automatic marksman-type rifles that didn't have a scope zoom-in, but just had an increased over-the-shoulder type zoom-in. There was the assault rifle, which is like your baseline, and then an LMG, which had a slower rate of fire than an assault rifle, but had more rounds and seemed to deal a slight bit more damage as well. In the pistol rounds, there was your machine pistols, which were extremely fast firing. You might as well just call them SMGs, because that's essentially what they were. And then there were the heavier hitting pistols, which, as far as I can tell, were more meant for hitting critical points and doing increased damage to those critical points. Now, moving on back into what is ugly. And it is, where does Anthem go? From what I remember from a tweet is that Anthem is reported to have approximately Witcher 3 levels of gameplay. The amount of hours I spent in Witcher 3 is insane. So they're talking 60 to 90 hours of story gameplay, from what I remember, that we could be experiencing, which, if that's the case, I think is phenomenal. I find it a little bit difficult to believe that they're going to put that much effort into the story, but being BioWare, I could totally foresee that happening, given their track record with other franchises that they've had. So that's great and all, but how does that help the longevity of the game? What is the end game for Anthem? Now, that is where my concern lies with Anthem. Where does the DLC take us? What happens after we complete the first story part of Anthem? Do we have expansions taking us to other parts of Anthem? Is there a new enemy that gets revealed? We're not really clear on where their direction is after the main story, nor are we clear on how long it's going to take us to get to that. So I'm a little concerned about where we go after we've reached end-game, but only time will tell with that. And my overall review of the demo is that it was poorly executed. There was some nice moments, and the game is fun, but there was nothing about the demo that I would say would draw in anyone new, or would increase the hype for this game. Because of how the launch was, and even during the gameplay, there was some serious issues with the lag and the frame rates that were just simply unavoidable. And here is where the title that I'm probably going to name this comes into play. I want to talk about the alpha. Obviously, I'm not going to give any gameplay footage, and what we experienced during the alpha is different than what you experienced during the demo. What I want to talk about is the little pieces of story that we were able to do during the alpha, and why I feel that that gives hope to this game. the story that we experienced during the alpha had an amazing cutscene associated with it. It explained what was going on in the world of Anthem. It explained some of the character relations early on and established how your character fits into the world of Anthem, how it has relations established with certain characters, and just genuinely gave me an experience that I haven't felt from any story campaign in a long time. And that's why I am still excited about Anthem, and why I still have hope for Anthem, is because the alpha showed us a part of the story that the demo should have given us. If the demo had given us the story that the alpha gave us, you would find that more people would have given this a better review, I feel. Because the story got me so connected right off the bat. Jumping into the middle of the story, and I didn't even feel like this was part of the main storyline. I felt like this was a part of some side quest storyline that they gave us. While good, it didn't feel like it was integral to the main story so much. And I felt that they should have focused on doing maybe a different part of the story to give to us, something that would have been more cinematically interesting, and would have helped us develop better character relations to some of the main characters. Because overall, the alpha was handled better than the demo. While there was some initial launch issues with the alpha, they were quickly resolved, and I would say that those that participated in the alpha had a better alpha experience than they did a demo experience. And the word of advice that I would give with this game is not to pre-order. Unless you've already pre-ordered, then that's fine. Obviously, by pre-ordering, you do gain some cool-looking cosmetics. But I don't think that for the average player, unless you really want those cosmetics, that it's worth pre-ordering. Simply because if they're having this much trouble at the launch, how much trouble are they going to be having? Now, I'm not going to say just straight out don't pre-order it. I pre-ordered it. I'm glad I pre-ordered it. But I don't think that unless you intend on putting some serious hours into this, that it's going to be worth it to you. To me, it's worth it. I plan to put on a lot of hours into this. I genuinely believe in Anthem wholeheartedly. But I feel that the game has a lot that needs to be worked on, given its current build. I feel that the developers need to really put some work in over the next couple of weeks, opening up their server base and providing more time and effort into working through the kinks that they currently have in the system. There is a lot that still needs to be worked on. One issue being that I could never straight get into a mission, into free play, or into any of the story missions. I did get lucky during this to where I would be able to just straight up load into it with no issue. But when I went into free play or to do one of the story missions, one of my friends that I was playing with I would start up the mission for us. He would load in, and I would have to quit out to the home screen, quit the game, load back into the mission, and then continue. And by doing so, I would miss out on some of the experience, and I would miss out on getting some of the story because of not being able to load in and start it at the same time. So they need to work through that issue, whatever that issue is. I don't know if that's server side or what, but they need to work through whatever that is. They need to figure out what they're going to do with the AI, because the AI tracking is kind of bad. They need to be careful with how they handle the microtransactions, and they also need to be very careful when dealing with instances in the free roam, because having enemies spawn out is annoying, but I've had them spawn in all of a sudden after they spawned out and take out half my health, and that alone, the way that the AI is porting in and out of the game, could affect how people view the game. Now, another thing upon launch is that they've said that at launch there's only going to be 3 strongholds. Now, strongholds are supposed to be later game events, not something that you would take on right off the bat. So, potentially that's not going to be too big of an issue. But that's essentially Destiny launching with only 2 or 3 strikes. It doesn't make much sense, because that's kind of the end game, is to go back and play these to gain loot. And with no multiplayer in Anthem, the game, until some DLC story expansion is released, I feel is going to be hinging on these really dynamic, ever-changing strongholds, and that if they aren't changing enough, and if they aren't enough variety in them, that there will not be a long-lasting Anthem. Which could spell disaster for BioWare. So it's in BioWare's best interest to produce these strongholds at a unique level and in a large variety very quickly from the get-go. They may not be there at launch, but within the first month for sure, they need to be putting in new strongholds. Now, hopefully they can resolve the issues that they're having fairly easily. And once the open demo releases to everyone, which in my opinion the VIP demo was an open demo because of how many slots they opened up. Reportedly 2.5 million people were trying to log in at launch, from what I heard off of their tweets and through other Discord channels and such. 2.5 million people, that's a pretty big number of people that were trying to launch into a demo. So if that was in fact the case, they need to be able to handle that launch day as well. So we'll see. And depending on how they handle the strongholds and DLC, and how heavily they microtransactions the cosmetics in this, is going to determine the health of Anthem and how quickly Anthem will either succeed or die. I'm hoping that it succeeds. Me personally, that's what I'm hoping, because Anthem is visually, it's a good game. It's a fun game. There's not any other game, in my opinion, like it out on the market. And yes, I have played Warframe. There are clear, distinct differences in how Anthem handles its gameplay and how Warframe handles it. And I think that Anthem is more unique from Warframe than what some people give it credit for. And I think that this game has the potential to be as good as Warframe and have an amazing story and story expansions depending on how the developers handle the game. But that's all yet to be seen. Sorry, I was just going over my notes real quick. So, now that we've got the main talking points out of the way, and there's not much time left in the video, I just want to take a minute to talk to you guys without the main talking points, how this game felt. This game felt good, but the alpha felt better. The alpha left me with more hope than the demo did. If the demo had been what we played and the alpha had been what we played for this, I think the alpha would have received better with the overall gaming community. It had a more captivating story section, and it just felt overall better. Obviously, the core game mechanics were the same. In the alpha, we weren't able to access the forge. I think that accessing the forge in this was excellent. I think that by refusing to let us into the forge in the alpha, that was smart, because being able to customize in this was a huge deal and was extremely fun. But I felt that they made a huge mistake when they did this instead of doing what they did with the alpha. With the alpha, they gave us a really awesome core story piece that was really captivating, that did a lot to tie you in emotionally. They didn't do that with the demo. And I think that that's going to play a greater factor into the amount of people willing to pre-order this game versus those that are just going to wait for the game to come out, and probably a number that are just going to wait for the price to drop. But anyways, guys, that's just what I've got in conclusion. I hope you guys have a fabulous day, and I do hope that this game does well. But in all fairness, the demo has been truly disappointing, and I hope that they do better on the next one. Anyways, guys, this has been Sin of Saints, and I'm gonna sign off. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.
Even the way it dies is unnerving. I'm gonna give you some things to forget that. I'm gonna go with